In this video, we're going to talk about the prohibition of alcohol, or many people just refer to it as prohibition. Now, the root word of prohibition is to prohibit. Prohibit means to not allow. So we're talking about the government not allowing the sale of alcohol in America. Now, prohibition is interesting. It only lasts for 12 years. Starts in 1920 and it goes up to 1933, which is considered still at the beginning of the Great Depression. Now, the 18th Amendment of the Constitution prohibited the sales and manufacture of alcohol in the United States. You couldn't sell it, you couldn't make it, and you could distribute it, which means that to take it throughout the country or to move it. Now, in some ways, this law made alcohol even more socially acceptable, and now women, many times referred to as flappers, would have access to alcohol. So this is really interesting. Women, specifically, probably more than any other group, before Prohibition, women were not allowed to really drink in public. It was seen as unladylike, and it would really be frowned upon socially. So while men would go to a tavern or a bar and they'd go drink alcohol, if a woman showed up, they'd look at her and they would think that there's something wrong with her, or she's not a presentable woman, and they basically look at her to get out. And many men liked going to the tavern as kind of a place where men could hang out and get away from their wives or other women. That's going to change a great deal during Prohibition, because actually alcohol in some ways will be easier to access for women, and culturally things are changing in America for women. Now, one big change was a type of woman called a flapper. Now, go down to the bottom. A flapper was a fashionable woman that wore short skirts. As you can see, they bobbed their hair, which is to cut it short, kind of bring it up, and listen to jazz music. So, while the women of the suffrage movement, which was the movement for women to have the right to vote, would have been wearing clothes that literally their skirts would go down past their ankles and above their necks, their daughters, the new generation, the roaring 20s during the 1920s or jazz age, they start really getting into jazz and the club music at the time and swing dancing. And they also start rebelling against American culture and their parents, and start doing the opposite of what their mothers expected. Sounds familiar with teenagers? And you can see on the bottom left-hand corner picture, you can see all the women. They're like grabbing their skirts, kind of holding it over their knees. They're showing off their legs, which was just unheard of before the 1920s. During Victorian America, women would never show off their legs, and then they're starting to dance and swing, and that is seen as kind of risque or inappropriate dancing. And then you can see on the bottom right hand corner the short hair, which is what's more feminine in a woman's hair. Long, beautiful hair was expected for all women, and it's actually the flappers are going to do the exact opposite. They're going to cut their hair short like a boy. And you can see in the top right hand corner in Prohibition, they're starting to destroy the beer and alcohol. They're breaking beer barrels and letting it spill all over. They're going to get rid of alcohol forever. Now, interestingly enough, probably the group with the biggest interest of outlawing alcohol would be women. Women wanted the prohibition of alcohol because the generation before the flappers, their mothers, a lot of the men would go drinking on the Saturday or Sunday, while even when the women go to church with the kids, they'd come home and they'd be physically and emotionally abusive towards the family. So a lot of women would blame it on the alcohol, saying, well, he's not like that when he doesn't drink. And especially hard liquor was causing a lot of problems, like whiskey. So during the temperance movement, which went with women fighting for the right to vote, temperance meant they wanted to outlaw alcohol, and they had achieved this in 1920. So a lot of people thought this was going to change things very positively. We quickly find out at first this is a great idea. Production goes up, people come to work and they don't drink, so more work gets done. Maybe some abuse towards the family members and fighting and violence in general might go down at first, But what we've learned with economics, whenever there's a demand, the supply will go up, and we're going to find out who is going to fill that supply. So we're going to try to watch this quick video. This is going to give some history on alcohol in the United States and give us an idea of just how alcohol had been such a part of American culture since the beginning of America, and how it's going to be hard for the U.S. government to make it wrong or against the law. So as you can see in the video, what happens as alcohol had such a long history in American culture, but when the whiskey, and at first it might have made sense to drink beer that did not have much alcohol in it, because it's actually safer than drinking the water. But that quickly causes problems because of the invention of, of whiskey or hard liquor that would get people drunk really quick, and the culture had not changed to adapt to the fact that people were drinking heavy liquor and becoming alcoholics. Now, so the prohibition of alcohol, as we talked about, wherever there's a supply in the law of economics, supply and demand, wherever there's a large demand, somebody's going to fill that supply. And as a result of high demand for alcohol, organized crime became lucrative or profitable business. So if the government's going to make something against the law that lots of people want, like alcohol, there's going to be somebody who's willing to try to fill that supply. Now, the challenge is going to be to try to contain some of the largest organized criminal organizations ever at the time. And many people call it the mafia. And a lot of Italians, Americans, especially from the island of Sicily, had used techniques where they've sold products illegally before. They became much more wealthy as a result of Prohibition, because they had something that almost a lot of people in America wanted. And also many people didn't think it was wrong to drink alcohol, or it should be against the law. So you could see a couple examples here. So some famous gangsters, we call them gangsters, or bootleggers, or illegal alcohol sellers were. And a bootlegger is an interesting term. It actually comes from before Prohibition, it was actually possible to go up to a guy who would have cowboy boots on, or some kind of boots, and you would tap the guy on the shoulder, you give him $1, you give him some change, and he would literally pull out a bottle of whiskey, and you get to drink some of that whiskey, put it back in the boot of his leg. So that's where the term bootleggers come from, people that would sell alcohol illegally. Some of the most famous gangsters, and I know you guys can guess the first one, top right hand corner, is Al Capone. People call him Scarface. They've made different movies off this guy. He's probably the biggest name, and a lot of the reason why is because he loved cameras. He loved being interviewed, put on film or in the newspaper. He liked talking. He loved himself in a lot of ways and became very famous because of that. Bugs Moran, which is another famous gangster. Lucky Luciano is Al Capone's probably biggest rival. And even Joseph Kennedy, to some extent. You could see that second picture from the bottom. The older gentleman standing next to John F. Kennedy, that was his father. John F. Kennedy becomes president of the United States. Joseph Kennedy becomes incredibly wealthy because he smuggles alcohol from the water from the Caribbean up in New England. He's from Boston, and they move the alcohol from they would have little ships or boats go out to meet these big boats full of alcohol and bring the alcohol in to the land to sell it. Now, rum runners or bootleggers are people that move the alcohol. The biggest difference would probably be rum runners are usually the guys that were moving it by boats over water, and they're going out to meet ships and bring it back to America. Bootleggers would actually be the guys that were selling it over land. And it got to the point where they're making their cars faster than the police to outrun the police, and it just got really out of control. It's hard for the police to enforce. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, the federal police are basically invented to deal with all this crime, and it becomes very expensive and hard to deal with Prohibition at the time. And now, we talked about women had more access to alcohol. One of the main reasons was a speakeasy. A speakeasy was a secret bar or gambling establishment where you could get alcohol. So they called it a speakeasy because you'd have to whisper, tap on the door, and know a code. And they'd let you in. And it might be in the basement of a grocery store or a market or another building. You go down there, and there's all these people drinking and gambling, which was illegal as well. And if you're Al Capone or you're Lucky Luciano, you're probably okay with women coming in and drinking alcohol.